So why don't we start by having each of you guys introduce yourself and your role in the film. Is that not on?
Check. Is that on? I think it's on.
Yeah.
He's a timid voice.
Yeah. So do I, can't you tell?
Hi, everybody. I'm Zach Schrank. We co-edited and produced this film. I guess on the title, I'm the director.
You are?
Yeah.
I'm Nate Utesh. That's hot. I'm the composer of the film. I didn't play the music.
More than that, and
It's graphic arts, a little bit of editing.
And I am Aaron Yoder, the drone pilot. Cinematography.
So sometimes I claim executive director privilege and get to ask the first question, so I'm going to do that. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a bit of a humanities scholar myself. And so one of the things I'm really interested in is how do you see this as an expression of the humanities?
Take it.
me? You want to go ahead?
Well, I'm not exactly in the academic world, but I would say that it's really like representative of like who and what we are on the planet, like what we're doing, you know, our footprint. So I think it's pretty integral to how we think about ourselves, you know, as a society. But
What I love, so I am an academic, and what I love about Aaron's footage is it is a very visceral expression, and chosen expressions too, I mean, we sought them out, of the types of processes and both very ordinary things that we're doing that maybe we just, from the ground, you don't, a sense of how strange it looks and how big it can be, but really that kind of disorienting reflection of who we are or what we're doing or even indirectly connected to. So I guess from that sense, it's connected to the humanities in terms of, you know, what is it that we are, who are we, why are we doing it this way? And a lot of this is just, it's just the way it is, right? It's industrial process, it's manufacturing, it's consumption. So it's a reflection of that, but Aaron's aerial vantage point just makes it feel, it's an unfamiliar of the very familiar in some ways.
Okay, well, I stole first question. Who would like to go second? Yeah.
I'm curious your process for like scouting the locations and figuring out where you want to film and then getting permission to film there. And then was there like anywhere you wanted to film and you were told no?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I relied entirely on Aaron. So all of the locations, most of them were chosen by me. We kind of discussed them, but Aaron also then, as the project got started, had some ideas too. So we came in with about 40 places that we knew we wanted to scout out, and so I had been doing some satellite imagery scouting for a while. That was right in the middle of the pandemic, the beginning of 2020. So I spent a lot of time just looking at satellite imagery of Indiana, and I guess that felt interesting at the time. And what else I was going to do, right? And so when Aaron and I met and we started talking about that, then he developed some ideas too. So we collaboratively kind of built upon this initial inkling I had that Indiana had some strange and influential or underrepresented ways of seeing the Anthropocene. And so, but my approach to trying to find those places was, I teach an environmental sociology class and I also teach a consumer society class. So we're talking a lot in the courses I teach about the materials economy, like just the circular process of how the world works. And there are also other films that kind of convey the same type of message of the Anthropocene. One's called The Anthropocene, the Human Epic by Edward Burtynsky. And I was just thinking, I wonder what equivalents are in Indiana from what I'm reading, from what I'm seeing. And through some of that research, found that Indiana is deeply embedded in the commodities economy. And so then when Aaron and I had a conversation, he had been doing this for a few years and he had some ideas too. Oh, I had seen this place, or I was over here, there's actually this really large facility, or here's this thing. The second part of your question about permission and what we could and couldn't, there were some places that Aaron couldn't film because of air restriction. But I'm going to turn the question over to him in terms of how he, with his piloting license, how he approached this and what he could and could not do.
yeah, so, well, basically the FAA makes the rules for where you can and can't fly a drone. So that was that determined largely where we could and couldn't fly the drone. And then, as far as the locations to film, it's basically nowhere that you can't see on Google Maps, that it's all readily available. So it's not like, there's some huge privacy concern or anything like that. But speaking of Google Maps, that was one of the huge inspirations, I think, in location scouting. I'm one of those people that just can get lost in Google Maps, Google Earth for hours at a time. So a lot of it was like virtual exploration, finding these sites. Some of them were places that I had seen before, some of them weren't. And you just looking around on Google Earth like, holy moly, what in the world is this? In this corner of the state where, maybe nobody ever goes, or maybe I've never been. But yeah, lots of interesting places.
And there were a number of locations where we read up on what you were allowed to fly over, with critical infrastructure, things like that. And but everything you saw in the film is legal to fly over if you have your license and you're at the right altitude, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So
It may change.
That would be a bad thing to know now.
I mean, yes. So we had the conversation.
This is being recorded.
There's sometimes, if you're in the drone world, there's a lot of talk about, over flights over critical infrastructure. And surprisingly, the FAA is the determining body that, says where you can and can't fly. And there's a map online you can go and look. And surprisingly, none of those sites are on their list for national security concerns. For critical infrastructure, so yeah.
You said you have stories of people questioning whether or not you should be there, and you were able to flash credentials and stuff and be like, "I'm a pilot. I do what I want."
Yeah, sometimes people will, occasionally people will try to. It doesn't happen very often. It's only happened a couple times to me, but somebody will come up and say, "You can't fly here," or whatever. In fact, so Zach and I live in South Bend, and Notre Dame is in South Bend there, and I was flying around their campus, and their police came to me and told me that you cannot fly here. The university has made a rule that there's no flights allowed over their property, and I didn't really want to get into a confrontation with them. I was like, all right, man. I knew the FAA rules that while their police department controls what happens on their property, what happens above their property is outside of their jurisdiction. But so they actually got my information and turned it into the FAA. And then I had a FAA, I don't know what his title was, but called me and questioned me about it. And we had a good conversation about it. I was like, so my understanding of the rules is this, and it was that, they make the airspace rules. And he was like, yeah, that's right, yep. He's like, so yeah, you did nothing wrong. I mean, there's an airport nearby, so I had authorization to be operating in that airspace. But, if I wanted to, I could go back and try to have a polite conversation with that police officer, which I don't think I'm going to. But yeah.
But the point is, Aaron followed the law. Yeah.
Correct.
Question from Nate. Could you talk a little about your process in scoring a film as it differs from writing for an album?
Yeah. One of the biggest things that I chose to do in approaching it that was very different than anything I'd done is not really watch the film in full or absorb it until I was actively scoring. So when Zach sent me first cut end of last year, middle of last year, I just very quickly scrubbed through it, kind of got an idea of what I was in for, kind of marked some time codes, but tried not to soak on anything. So for whatever reason, I really wanted to experiment with this idea that the first thing that came out of me was happening as I was watching it for the first time, not reviewing it over and over, making notes and figuring out, but just very knee-jerk, visceral reaction in my scoring. I mean, I went back and edited things and made things prettier, but for the most part, and I didn't jump around. I started at the beginning of the film and scored it all the way through linearly from start to finish, which didn't make sense. I just wanted to put those constraints on it for the fact that it was so meditative and bizarre. It's easy to get lost in the visuals of it. It feels disorienting. Zach keeps using the word disorienting. It truly was, and then near the end, able to kind of bring back themes and have a plan a little bit. But what you heard, by and large, was my gut reaction to the footage as I watched it for the first time.
I want to piggyback off that, because one of the things I really enjoyed about the score was it almost seemed vocal. It almost seemed like a narrator, and particularly as you transitioned us from section to section.
Yeah.
I felt like, okay, now the voice is changing.
Yeah.
Was that something you were going for?
It was, and again, we talked about this idea that in films like this, but specifically in this moment scoring Liminal, I got to kind of be a character in a story that had no narrator, no narration, and decide when the film was dark, when it was lighter, when the villain would enter and leave, and whether or not that all reads that way. That's what was in my head during it. I also used different ways to control the hardware than I had ever done. Like with a MIDI guitar and a breath controller and other things where I am allowing so much room for error and human interaction and the manipulation of it, doing something that would force me to be dizzy and maybe pass out while I'm writing something, made it feel so human. It was just electronics, it's just hardware, but all of a sudden it had this human element where I'm dizzy and I'm spitting on myself while writing, and then maybe you feel that, maybe you don't, but I hope that it has this weird human quality about it because of that. And then trying to recreate that live tonight is another story, but
It worked.
Yeah.
Kind of to keep going with what you're talking about right now, what was the collaborative process between, so you got it raw, but was the title Liminal already set when you?
it wasn't.
And the different names of the pieces?
So I'll let them talk too, but Zach's been working on this for years, and Zach's been talking to me about it for years. It's just like, hey, do you want to do this at some point? And this is mostly yes, but later. I've lost my train of thought. What was the first thing you asked about? The process. Yeah, so that first edit I received was maybe an hour and a half long, and one of the first suggestions was, I'm not saying it's boring, this is all beautiful, but what if this became like a best of collection and we got it to an hour, which I think was really important in a film like this, to risk leaving the audience wanting more than wanting less. And then selfishly made my work a little easier because I had 30 minutes less to score. But I also tried to stick to the edit. Definitely moments where I'm in a groove and I'm in a 4-bar structure and I need to change and the edit didn't work. We'd go back and tweak it, and they were very generous about that. But again, for the most part, I just stuck to the edit as they made it, which was a cool limitation to have on the sequence of the writing process.
And then before that, so Aaron and I started this almost exactly 3 years ago, April 2020. And it was at that first stage all remote, even though we're both in South Bend. The first meeting we had, we sat, where was it, in Union Station?
Yeah, about
The old train station.
20 feet apart.
About 20 feet apart, and it's just funny thinking about that now. And then we did everything through Zoom and sharing things through Drive. But I had the conceptualization in my head and mapped out not exactly what we saw tonight, but a general theme that followed the process. So in the film, you saw the titles, which operate nicely on Nate's end, kind of a theme or a song almost, and then below that the subtitle gives the more direct kind of working definition that we had originally. We wanted to pick up this process of nature and then extraction and production and consumption and disposal and lay it out that way. And so once I had that kind of storyboarded or mapped out, then Aaron entered the picture and said, yeah, I could get those things, you know. I mean, it might take 6 months, 7 months, but we traveled around, Aaron traveled around. There is actually one tiny shot where Aaron and I make an appearance in the quarries. Only we know where you can see us, like hiding in the corner. But
You can see a hat if you watch really close.
yeah, but we had this great opportunity to just wander around the state and kind of over the summer of 2020 and the spring of 2020, and then Aaron did a number of the excursions by himself as well. Then we had all this footage, and we sifted through it for months and kind of figured out. And there's, of course, behind you see the photographic exhibit that goes with it too. We wanted to create this depiction in images and then work through the film process after that. And so Nate came in then kind of secondary after all of the images, after all of the video came in, and we realized, okay, I think we've got something. We didn't know if it would be 30 minutes, an hour and a half, 2 hours, but we kind of picked through that storyline, and then by the time Nate got to it, then the three of us were able to share more ideas on how we could trim it down, make it more palatable. So Aaron and I edited it. Aaron edited everything on his computer, and then sent things to the mail to Fort Wayne here, and Nate picked up from there, and then there was some driving around the state to get things finalized, stuff like that. But it really was kind of this remote collaboration for on and off for 3 years.
And the title was kind of this 11th hour thing of, Zach and Aaron have been very gracious to me in a lot of weird. I feel like I'm the non-academic rube blowing into synthesizers, but it's like, hey, real quick, the title's super long.
I'm not an academic too, it's okay.
Indiana in the Anthropocene doesn't have good mouthfeel. Is there a one word we could come up with? And pretty quickly, Liminal was that.
You didn't know that you were participating in a long-standing tradition of academic things having a colon.
Yeah.
That's true. It's like a paper.
Yeah.
Aaron and I didn't have a title. I mean, we just were calling it the Indiana Anthropocene.
Indiana
right?
Anthropocene was our kind of working title through it, and Liminal came about towards the end.
Yep.
Why Liminal? Is that?
Well, and then also, I'm sorry, but I'm really interested in this because I love the way that just the time expressed itself through the visual and the sound and everything. And so I'm just wondering, was Liminal and the titles of each chunk did you come up with those titles, or were those titles already?
We worked on it together for sure.
It was seamless. Like, it was beautiful in the way that it all fit together.
Thank you.
Time kept you going.
Yeah, so Nate kept giving his input on how this could be expressed artistically, compositionally, musically, packaged together in a way that kind of fit the way he was envisioning it. And the title Liminal came out of that conversation, and we liked the title, meaning a lot of what you see in the film is this expression of something in between. It's not the state in its natural state, right? Hardwood forest. One of the densest hardwood forests and wetlands in North America before settlers came here. But it's also still has a lot of nature, but a lot of industry too. But we're moving into something different. So the idea that the Anthropocene is a phase shift, we're in this in-between space. And we kind of approached every title like that. How can we evoke an idea connected to what we're seeing?
Conceptually, it's gorgeous.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was curious about two of those, Infinity and Alchemy. Those two caught my attention.
We get that question
Yeah.
on those two, actually.
And none of the titles they're meant to be expressions more than perfect encapsulations of what's going on here. So in Infinity, I mean, we had this conversation, we were thinking, what's a good expression that feels like the music, that sounds like it, but the idea that in theory, solar and wind is infinite. Maybe it can't provide an infinite amount of energy, but it's non-exhaustible. And then the alchemy, it has this chemical connotation, but also the definition means this almost like magical transformation. And what we're trying to show in that is this transformation of these steel coils that you see then magically appearing as cars, even though the cars might not be made of steel, maybe more aluminum, but just this idea of transformation from raw elements into something that that's as ubiquitous as an automobile.
First of all, this score was amazing and the movie was amazing. You guys did an awesome job. Oh my gosh. I got a question. I've lived in probably 10 different places in Indiana. I went to one of the integrated steel mills up in Northwest Indiana, I live in Northwest Indiana now, in Central Indiana, down in the Bloomington area. I lived in Southern Indiana. Actually, my mom and dad were part of Save the Valley with Marble Hill with their power plant over there. Why did you guys decide not to like label anything?
Great question. This is something Aaron and I, we actually all talked about this. What do you think, Aaron? I'm
Yeah.
curious on your thought, because we debated this.
Because one of the things I noticed was there was only like 2 places that I could identify, you know, Indianapolis, the stadium. I can't think of the name of it.
The Lucas Oil.
Lucas Oil, yeah.
And obviously the Memorial Stadium downtown, you know, those were the only 2 that I was like, yeah, I'm like, what mill is that?
Very intentional
Yeah.
to have that confusion happen.
Just kind of the mystery of it, I think, more than anything, you know.
And also, my thought was if because we did consider having a label for each location. Some of the movies that inspired us do that. They'll give you a sense of where you're at, and that is helpful. And I, part of me wanted to do that. Part of us wanted to do that. But then we realized it might draw too much attention to that one place as having an because we wanted at the end of the film for it to feel like this whole thing instead of a bunch of discrete different places, like it was this living body almost. And so by drawing attention to the place, and we even talked about this in terms of the website, the original website does have a pinpoint for the 40 plus locations, and it really is spread all over the state. But our fear was if we say, oh yeah, that steel mill was, Steel Dynamics or whatever, then it would assume too much about that place. Then the other thing is we also didn't want to we didn't want to have a positive or negative impression that we're trying to give. And so some of the places, maybe they look really beautiful or they look kind of ugly, and we didn't want to draw attention to, for example, some of the industrial farming. We didn't want to say, it's that farm in that particular place that has all those cows and those, for the sake of not picking on anybody, I guess.
It makes sense, but
Right.
it's an awesome movie, it really was.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You only get one, sorry.
I don't want.
I'm kidding.
No, I kind of appreciated that you did, and all of our heads were like, where's that? But also, really everything you showed us is happening in multiple places.
Mhm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those scenes, you could say, well, that'd be scary, but then
That's right. And it could also, a lot of this stuff is happening in every other state or in countries all over the world. So the idea of evoking Indiana as a microcosm means that all of this imagery should, in some ways, be recognizable, and there should be some kind of lateral example of this in other places too.
universal messaging.
Yeah.
But my question, you mentioned your field of study.
Mhm.
Say that again.
Sociology, yeah, and environmental sociology.
Environmental, I heard a talk from someone who's talking about sort of the next phase of recycling that we're gonna need to go into, which is the building materials recycling. And so as we're looking at the wastelands of the junk cars, it wasn't as tragic to me because I knew a lot of that steel is going to be recycled.
That's right.
The most tragic scenes were like the warehouses and the, where they're just sitting there.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'm curious in your field of study, is there a next chapter to your movie? Are you hopeful about that wasteland,
Oh,
which is our
It's a good question.
building material?
So much of the energy of society just goes into maintaining the infrastructure that's there already, right? Because if you don't want it starts to decay, and then it has to be either disposed of or recycled. And you can recycle concrete, you can recycle these things. It takes a lot of effort. It's a lot easier just to demolish and start over. To maintain an advanced society takes a lot of inputs and then a lot of maintenance. And I think, and this is beyond my specialty or my expertise, but in order to live in a very sustainable way, we do have to be thinking about materials, not just, aluminum cans and paper, but the materials of our society as, well, how can they be reincorporated in something else, or how can they be, their use be prolonged or have alternative uses. And so there are very sophisticated ways to recycle homes and parts of homes and things like that, but it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of time, and you also have to invest in infrastructure for that kind of closed loop system. So I don't know about the next phase, but yeah, it's not only difficult to build a society, but also difficult to maintain it.
I would just say that you named that chapter, the ruins,
Mm-hmm.
and you nailed it because you're looking at like the abandoned limestone
Mhm.
quarry, and they might as well have been like Greek ruins.
That's right. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you guys did an amazing job.
Oh, thank you so much.
Was there any sort of component of it that was sort of like an economic sort of, did you take that into consideration in choosing, obviously, it's very tied into what people build or what society builds, but did you intentionally sort of include any commentary, or was that an intent behind
Did we intentionally not include commentary? Is that what you said?
or did you include it or not include it, either way?
Well, in terms of the economy, what I wanted the sequencing to show was this concept of the materials economy. So less about economy with supply or demand or things like that, but the economy of in order for the world to go round, we treat the world as such and such, where nature is something where we extract things from it, and then the process eventually goes from all the way from distribution to consumption and then waste, and then it just starts all over again. But that's kind of the extent of the commentary of how the materials economy works. But I don't feel like I'm answering your question entirely.
No, I mean, that was a pretty good answer, it's just, that sounds like a commentary on how our economy works today.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess implied is that so much of that materials economy expands and it's global because it's necessary in many ways to continue to grow and to expand. And so the logic behind all the things you saw in the film and kind of what constitutes the Anthropocene is this byproduct of the need to constantly extract more materials to grow economies, not just Indiana's economy, but Indiana's feeding into the global economy with its energy and its aggregates and its materials and its food. So the logic really is economic in the sense that growth is imperative. So that's not stated, but I guess maybe it's kind of an implied assumption of what drives the Anthropocene.
Well, and I would like to jump off this a little bit because I don't feel like the movie lacks a lot of commentary. I think it's there in the music.
Okay.
I think that when you were talking about earlier about setting up characters and when the good guy and the bad guy walks in, I felt that in the music. I knew who the good guys and the bad guys were. But just when you started that transition into the next chapter, and the whole vibe of the music would change again. It was like, here comes the villain. And so I do think that commentary is there.
Well, and I will say, Aaron and I watched all this for like a year and a half with silence, right? All the clips of silence, and we would talk about this like. Is this kind of boring? Is this, is this exciting?
After you watch the same clip hundreds of times, yeah.
But then when we transferred it over to Nate, then we watched it and we're like, that was exciting, that was really cool. So.
But I think we wanted to leave out any commentary just to let people think about things for themselves too.
Somebody used the word meditation at the beginning, and I think that's the key to it, is that it gets everybody in their own headspace about it. And
For sure.
You drive past those things and you don't realize how big they are.
Yeah, yeah.
You see them in a totally different view, and it changes your whole perception.
The scale is
Right.
wild. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Meditation, because we're just showing things. We're not saying you have to think. I mean, we have our thoughts, but.
It's like a Zen koan almost. It's
Yeah.
like you need to think about this, but I'm not going to tell you how.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, because we're all part of it. Yeah.
I feel like in the back you've got a little
I was
thing.
just wondering what was most surprising in the process of creating the film.
Well, yeah.
Wow.
What was the most surprising for you, Aaron?
For me, it was like the endless like ideas of places we can incorporate. Like the more we brainstormed, I mean, we just kept coming up with new ideas and new ideas and new ideas, and it was like,
I don't know how when I got the drive with the first cut, it also had clips, and I could just see literally thousands of clips. Like I don't know how anyone made a film out of this. This is insane.
yeah. So the like endless inspiration. Like the more we got into the concepts, I'm like finding more and more locations and more interesting. Like, are we really hitting everything possible to this idea of the materials economy in our society? But we finally kind of had to like say, all right, we got to stop collecting new stuff, or we'll never actually make anything like a finished thing. So that was pretty surprising, I think, for me.
It was surprising that this conversation that Aaron and I had in March of 2020, right as the coronavirus was this thing, that he picked up the phone and he didn't know who I was, and he immediately said, "That sounds really cool." Like I was expecting him to say no, but I think part of it was in those first few weeks of COVID, it was just like, what am I going to do with my life now, And so I just took a chance. I called Aaron up and said, "I really like your drone photography. I'd love to expand on this." And he said yes. And then Nate, I approached him and he said, "That sounds great." And I was like, wow, that was easy. I mean, why did that happen the way it is? But then also the people that we picked up along the way that took interest. So Indiana Humanities, Megan Teligman and Sam Opsel took an interest in it, and that was really cool. I didn't know that somebody would want to do that. And then this group, Hoodocs and Rocky Walls and Zach Downs, they said, "Oh, we'd love to help you with this." And so those were not things that we came into thinking we would have partners. And so to pick them up along the way was really exciting, because it meant that, so for example, this event right now, never ever did Aaron and I think, we will screen it at the Cinema Center in Fort Wayne. That came out of the conversations between Nate and Megan and Sam, and then, thinking about, programming. Oh yeah, there could be this whole thing where we share and talk about it with people. And so I'm just, this moment right now, I didn't expect to be here in this theater, and so yeah.
And then just a quick question, if we wanted to see this again, is it streaming on Hoodocs?
So the plan is for it to stream on Hoodocs at the conclusion of the Unearthed series. So right now, it's bumping around in different spots in the state. Right now, I think our last planned screening is in September in Bloomington, and then after that, the plan, at least we're not sure, but the plan is it should stream on Hoodocs. Hopefully, also, so if you're not a member of Hoodocs, it's a pretty cool program. It's Indiana-based documentaries and nonfiction films. But I think they might also offer this, if you're not a member, you can just rent it, like you would on Amazon Prime or something like that. So hopefully in September. Yeah.
Piggybacking on what he said, he gives you the call, and beautiful cinematography, and I sometimes hear or feel as though, drone photography is sometimes treated as a gimmick or like a novelty or like some sort of, it's corporate, this is a commercial type of thing. Mm-hmm. And I think you wielded the medium well, and so I just wanted to ask you how you felt about using this, the power of the image and the power of specifically drone photography to showcase, what you guys were trying to do with that. So, I mean, what did that feel like for you, I guess, to get that call, but also as you're going out to do this, thinking of this as less I'm filming, Notre Dame for a commercial for them or something like that?
Yeah, this kind of, I think, ties to the other question about things that surprised us. But yeah, the day Zach called me, I mean, I know Zach, and I get calls it's mostly commercial stuff, like a lot of real estate, sometimes inspection stuff, and it's, at first that kind of stuff is exciting, but it's like, oh, great, But this, we were, I don't know how long we chatted on the phone that day.
We talked for like an hour and a half immediately.
Yeah, so like he starts giving me this pitch for this idea, and I'm like, oh, wow. yeah, this is like finally something like meaningful that like I could apply what I do with drones to. So, I mean, from that very first conversation, I was like, I am all in. This is an amazing idea. Like that, you know, we can do something that means something. Like taking real estate pictures of a house, like that's doesn't mean anything. It means something to the realtor, right? But nobody else cares. So
And Aaron he has a company, Indiana Aerials. He does a bunch of, like right now you're doing a lot of work with wind farms in Iowa, right? Like inspecting wind farms. But he also on his website had a lot of really neat artistic pictures. Beautiful photos of South Bend and things around, you know, in his track. So he would be doing his work, but then he would also stop somewhere and take some cool photos. And so I saw this guy, he has all the technical stuff, but he really likes taking amazing aerial photography, which I think is fascinating.
yeah, I do what I had to do to pay the bills, and then I would like every time I'd go out to do a job, I'm like, I'd stop and get something along the way of interest for myself, you know. So this was like just one of those projects that I was like, I mean, there wasn't a budget or anything. It was just two guys doing something fun, you know, and we didn't know if it would ever, like, the fact that we're here today is a total surprise. Like,
Absolutely.
we didn't know it would actually ever turn into anything. So, but yeah, it was a real blast.
Did you shoot it with one drone or a fleet?
Like 99% of that was the same drone, was one drone. Yeah.
I know we're getting close to time, so I've been meaning to ask this for you all for a while. What's your favorite shot or moment from the movie and why?
Oof.
Sorry, that was my teacher voice.
This isn't my answer. I just wanted to take a second while we're in Fort Wayne, because we're not in Fort Wayne when we're in other cities. The Fort Wayne shot in the film is the detonation in the quarry, which is crazy. Yeah,
That's at the Hanson quarry.
and was a total serendipitous moment.
Total
Aaron
blind
had already
luck.
shot it or something, and then
I was over here doing a commercial real estate job, and I was like, hey, that huge quarry's over here. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go get some aerials of this thing while I'm here. And while I was out there, the siren started going, and the guy came around and was like, hey, we're getting ready to do a blast. You're going to have to leave the area. I was like, really? Where? Right now? So, yeah, I was very thankful. I just got lucky on that one.
Amazing.
It totally felt like that was going to happen at that moment in the film.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
Expected it.
The soundtrack right there was just like, boom. Just amazing moment. But I think probably if I had to pick a favorite shot, it was the tulip trestle. Like sunrise, the picture, the opening shot. And if you watch, I don't know, you might have noticed, right when the title pops up, there's this little bird that just comes like diving. And when I was flying the drone, I did not see that.
Wow.
Because I probably would have like flinched or something. So thankfully I didn't. But yeah, that was just a magical moment.
And it is a
be
beautiful
there.
place. I don't know if anybody here has ever been to the Tulip Trestle. When I lived in Bloomington 20 years ago, I trekked out there, and it's amazing. It's a half-mile long. It's 150 feet in the air. There's still a train that goes across it. It's just, and it's very remote, and it feels, what I love about it, it feels very otherworldly and beautiful all at once. So yeah, I love that photo, and it's truly pretty in all the good ways too, you know, aesthetically pleasing in ways that feel good. I think my one part that I always find myself really liking is the transition from the coal mines to then the coal mound, where there's an excavator carting along coal for the power plant, just because it feels so strange, and you know after you see the revelation of it that it's just part of this process of burning coal for electricity, and you see where it comes from the ground, and it's that simple, you know. But that's one of many.
For me, when I was initially scrubbing through the film and trying not to pay too close attention, could not help but notice what we referred to as the Mordor Mount Doom scene with the kayaks in Gary. And I just wrote down Mordor at 16 minutes. Like, I don't know what that means, but I'm going to keep it in my head. And when we get to Mordor, it's going to be the Mount Doom moment for me. Unbelievable. So, and that, again, was serendipitous too, right?
That was
Like,
another just
all of a sudden there's kayak hops.
lucky
in
day.
Yeah.
I was there filming, and it's like, holy cow! Here's this desolate industrial. I mean, it looks post-apocalyptic because half of that stuff is abandoned and fallen apart, and and here comes this couple on a kayak, like they're on vacation or something.
It's a great metaphor.
It's like,
It's a
there
great
shouldn't
metaphor.
be any humans here. This can't be safe. But yeah, that was pretty amazing.
I just have a super quick question, specifically for Nate. Can I listen to the score on Spotify or maybe
Soon.
vinyl?
Yeah, soon. We in part of my more selfish, bigger scheme for this was to get a label to hear it, and Tuesday we had an owner of a label screen it, and afterwards was like, yeah, we're doing this, we're releasing this.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know when, but it's happening. So excited. Yeah.
All right, looks like we're reaching that. Oh,
Will it be a 4-hour director's cut?
Oh, man.
There could
Somewhere
be a
it
30-hour director's cut, maybe.
We'll just send you the whole group Google Drive. You can just sift through it yourself. You can make it.
well, it looks like we're reaching our natural conclusion. So before we go, I want to give a big shout out and thanks once again to Indiana Communities.
Yeah.
I also want to thank the members of our board who attended tonight. Thank you guys for coming. And our board president, Derek Devine, I want to give him a shout out. I will say it, and I will say it, and I will say it, and I will say it. But thank you specifically to all of you. Cinema Center exists because of you. We maintain because of you. And so every time you come out, every time you renew your membership, you keep us afloat. And so having you all here tonight has been wonderful, and we just want to thank all of you as well.
Yeah, this is a really special place. It really is. We don't have a place like this in South Bend, and I used to live in Tucson. We had a place called The Loft like this, and they're really special places. So you're lucky to have such a great cinema right here in Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Oh, you got it. Thank you so much.